Thank you, Stefan. Thank you all for being here. I am going to talk a little bit about who I am, my practice, and then go into some of the multi-channel, or a multi-channel piece that I worked on. Let's see, when was that? Maybe in March? I don't know when. Time. But and kind of in between we'll do a few like deep listening practices, because I feel like a big part of multi-channel, working with multi-channel audio is listening. We'll dive in. So the talk is titled Becoming Listening, a Spatial Practice. I'm an interdisciplinary artist, educator, writer, and deep listener, based in Chicago in Texas. I approach art as a creative research practice, and my work in sound focuses on field recording, text scores, sound walks, listening practices, spatial audio, improvisation, and live performance. I hold an MFA in sound from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and study deep listening at the Center for Deep Listening at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And here's a few of projects that I work on. This is field recording. This is sort of becoming listening with sound within different environments. This is a photo of a sound walk that I did a few years ago in Westridge Nature Preserve. I work with the Midwest Society for Acoustic Ecology as a teaching artist and lead sound walks every summer. And this is a performance still from a performance piece I did while at the Bemis Center for Contemporary Art, an artist residency in Omaha, Nebraska. This is a short clip of a film that I worked on called Untitled Iowa, about the artist Anamdieta. I also am a writer. I have a practice in writing, creative writing essays. This was an essay that was published in 2019 called Sounding La Raza Cosmica in Routledge anthology called Latina Outsiders, Remaking Latina Identity. And so, yeah, this is I think about my artistic practice as a practice of becoming and listening and kind of going in that cycle. And what I'll be talking about today will be mostly focused on my work in listening and approaches to working with the CLEAT system here at Elastic. My interest in sound and listening has roots in storytelling and poetry and in the poetics and politics of space. However, my work in the past few years, post-pandemic, has been about connection as a way to understand our environment through my work with sound walks, field recording, and acoustic ecology, as well as through deep listening as a social practice. And I also have foundations in the improvisation community. I worked a few years in Houston, Texas, under my mentor David Dove and the Nameless Sound organization, which was formerly the Pauline Oliveros Foundation. How many of you are familiar with deep listening? Yes, amazing. And that's okay. So deep listening is a wonderful creative meditative practice that this particular version was coined by the composer Pauline Oliveros. She's amazing. If you don't know her, I highly recommend looking up her work. The piece I will play for the CLEAT system is actually featuring her voice, so she's like a very prominent person in my sonic practice, I guess. Yeah, so we'll do a few deep listening exercises together, and that'll be really fun. And so, yeah, my work in deep listening is a way of meditation, of becoming attuned to the environment, to listening, to connecting sound through sound, and to the perception of our bodies in a space. This is a very casual conversation. It's more of an invitation to slow down, to listen, to sense both the multi-channel system we have available here at Elastic and our own systems of listening, which is the body. Yeah, I'll be showing and talking through some of my work, and we will do a few sound meditations to get us on the same wavelength as both receivers and transmitters of sound. I have this quote up by an amazing composer, Marian Amache. How many of you have heard of this work, woman, person, amazing person, amazing ears? I cannot say enough about Marian Amache and how she has changed my viewpoint about listening, about auditory perception, psychoacoustics. I highly recommend looking into her work. She works with a lot of really interesting technical aspects of sound and perception and sonic perception, which is something I'll just kind of glaze over here during this talk, but she's a really interesting being. She has this wonderful and collected, what would you call it? Maybe an anthology of collected works that Blank Forms put out a couple of years ago, selected writings and interviews. But yeah, this is kind of a quote that I think about a lot in terms of music and sharing and being present with one another in a space, and the importance of listening to one another. So some things that I am thinking about when I'm making, or approaching multi-channel music. This talk is more of an approach. It's not really going to go into hardcore technical aspects. But these are I think ideas to just, kind of float out there to you, and maybe you'll be interested, maybe this will resonate, maybe it won't, I don't know. But I think a lot about temporal studies, how we're thinking about time, and in sound, how we're thinking about working with time and wavelengths and frequency. I think a lot of audio is tied to memory, and how I think my approach to sound is working through and with memories and space and time, and especially when I do work with field recordings. And oops, there we go. Also, when I'm performing, I think a lot about time, spatial time, and when I'm working with field recordings and land, I think a lot about geological time and that sort of deep time that's present in the land and also in the body. We have a lot of memories stored, and if we think about our bodies, it is deep time because we're iterations of one another, which is really beautiful. All right. So, something that I also think a lot about, especially when working with the CLEAT system, is how sound, where does sound come from? Right now, it's coming from, these speakers here, but I do a lot of field recording, so when I'm out in the space, I think about, sound and how it's working within a field. When I come to the CLEAT system, it's like sound is coming from above, and so I think about, naturally the only sounds we hear from, above are like sounds of the sky, sounds of the wind, trees, thunder, sirens, planes, birds. And so I think when I'm working with the CLEAT system, I think a lot about perception and what happens when we introduce other sounds into a space. And something I think that it does, it makes us consider sound as a sonic sense, and understanding how we experience the sonic sense too, whether it's like through volume, or thinking about like imagined sound, and playing with the idea of like what is expected and what occurs within the system. I think about the CLEAT system as a form of a cloud, and within that sort of, how, how the sound of thunder works. There's this rapid expansion of air after lightning strike, and then it's like, kind of magical how multi-channel sound can work in a room, because you're creating this space, you're creating this environment, and I think it's really interesting to, and magical to be able to have that power to work sound throughout a room. Let's see. So I'm interested in sound as a sense, as a way of looking, of listening deeper, of processing and understanding energy. And I think something we don't typically talk about when we talk about sound is ideas surrounding perception, and that's a reason why I brought in Marianne Amashe quote, and Marianne Amashe's work. If you're interested, I highly recommend going into her sort of field. I think it's really easy to become lost in the sort of technicalities of sound, in the power of machines. It's really fun, but I think about the body a lot, and I think sometimes we forget about how sound reacts, how sound and the body react to the perception of sound. And within my work, I believe we're porous beings. We are open to and continuously imprinted upon by our environments. Like I said, my processes are always in a state of becoming, of the sort of swinging pendulum of energy. And in some ways, I feel like my practice is, my practice in sound is a practice in energy, because that's what sound is. It's this vibration, it's this frequency, it's this live thing. And I think also within my practice, I'm interested in growing with environments and not against them, sort of accepting that flux that happens. Okay, let's see. So I also feel like understanding multi-channel work can be an exercise that you could do, I think, is going for a walk and listening in different spatial environments, whether it's rural or urban, and kind of sort of ear training yourself, and going as you're going throughout these spaces, like trying to tune into different sounds. So, say you're walking down Diversity and you hear this, car engine, and then it's like, do you hear the wheels? Do you hear the engine? Do you hear the muffler? What is like the actual point of the sound? And then it's like, you know, that's one sound that's happening, and then there's other sounds because, you know, we're in spatial environments constantly, and so there's, you know, people, there's, you know, and it's a really interesting exercise to try and like kind of focus your listening on different sounds within spaces. So I feel like that's one way that I approach thinking about multi-channel work and thinking about sort of like sonic perception. And I think by attuning to the surrounding environment, we engage in sound as a dynamic presence and deepening our sensory connection to, I don't know, working with multi-channel music. And so after that, we'll do a little exercise in deep listening together, where we will focus our sonic sense on the breath. So this is a little entry point. So all of you, if you can, you know, sit with your both feet on the ground, and then go ahead and take a deep breath in, and then let it out. And then, I forgot to mention this, but when you take a deep breath in and you let it out, go ahead and let your exhale be audible. There you go. Thank you. So go ahead and take a deep breath in and out. And then we'll repeat this until our attention is focused on the sound of the breath. So go ahead and start again. So in and out. In and out. And so maybe now your attention is focused to the sound of your breath. So let's keep going and try to extend your perception, your awareness to maybe the sound of your neighbor or someone across the room. So go ahead and inhale, exhale. Okay. Can we hear our neighbor? Yeah. Great. Awesome. That's great. This is just an entryway into listening to the self, and to kind of focusing your sonic sense in the space around the room. So another approach to multi-channel sound is not only kind of working with breathing, listening, but I think a lot about landscapes, a lot of my work. And so this is a clip of a landscape in West Texas. The sound, ooh, hello. The sound isn't that great. I will admit that it's camera sound, so there's a lot of wind. But the sound is not the point in this feature. It's kind of going through the sort of visual, sonic awareness of space. And it's a bit of a point of reference in understanding how to listen with the eyes. And so I'm going to play a little bit. Hopefully it's not too loud. So what is happening here is that we have layers of space and time, sort of oral memory. The mountain sits in the background, and if we're thinking about multi-channel audio, I think about working with multi-channel audio as kind of a landscape, and so maybe in the background there's a drone, which could be the mountain, this thing that's kind of always kind of present. And then we have these layers that can, exist over like the sky, the wind. There's tiny sort of granular textures that are happening throughout the long grasses. I think there's a lot that is going on that can be kind of mapped onto the sonic landscape. And so, yeah, I'm thinking about a lot of the sounds of what's happening in the foreground, what's happening in the background, how things are moving in a space, in a room. And one thing I would like to point out is that it does take time and space to create a piece of multi-channel work within the CLEAT system, so I highly recommend you signing up for those open slots that are maybe on Tuesdays or Wednesdays?
Usually Tuesdays, but we're flexible.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we will stop this. West Texas is great. Glad you agree. Well, let me see. Okay, this one will be fun. So, also in thinking about multi-channel work or sound and landscapes, I think a lot about orientation, how sounds orient in a room, and how we receive those sounds and how we orient our bodies and our ears in a room. So, this small little group, I'm going to ask everyone to get up. And we're going to become sound as we're listening and becoming all the time. I'm going to use my handy compass to do this. And so we're going to face the directions and make sounds. Is everyone comfortable facing directions and making sounds together? Yeah. Amazing, amazing. Okay. So let's see. We'll go ahead and face east, which is, let's see. I am facing, wait, All right, east is that way. All right, so we'll go ahead and stand east. And we can breathe. And when you're ready, go ahead and make a sound to the east. It can be any sound, it can be a breath, it can be a vowel sound if you're not comfortable with making sound. Those are pretty easy, E, I, O, U. Or you can just hum, any way you feel comfortable. Okay, so we're facing east, and we'll make a sound. Wonderful. And then we'll take, let's see, a like quarter step to the left and face north. When we're ready, go ahead and make a sound to the north. Wonderful. We'll go ahead and take another quarter step to the left and face west. And whenever you're ready, make a sound to the west. Wonderful. And so we'll take another quarter step to the left and face south. And when you're ready, we'll make a sound to the south. Great. And so we'll go ahead and face center. So we'll face up each other. Center. And when you're ready, go ahead and make a sound. Wonderful. Thank you for entertaining that with me. I think it's, it's interesting to orient and be with the directions. And as a performer, I mean, we're always kind of like bounding within the space, but thinking about, how our bodies are positioning to sound, whether it's us as a listener or us as a performer, how are we orienting, where do we orient, is something I also think about. Let's see. Oh, let's see. This is also, let's go ahead and do this one. Okay. We'll go ahead and get back up. And this one will kind of, I feel like this is good, or if you want to get out and be over here, we can kind of be together. But this one's involving the breath, so however each of you are comfortable with the breath. So this is a good listening exercise, I think, that is could be considered multi-channel work, because we're each channels, we're speakers, in a room, interacting with each other. So with this one, this is a deep listening exercise called breath improvisation. So while we're standing in a sort of circle, go ahead and bring attention to the breath, and with short or longer puffs of air, you can do like a deal. And you can use these sounds of the breath to improvise a playful piece, interacting with others for 3 to 5 minutes. try not to vocalize the breaths. And you can notice, any differences that you feel after the improvisation, whether it's like in the body or differences that you feel sonically. You can also, play with the rhythms, textures, and shapes of the breath as if it were composition. And you can also you can also walk around the room and we can also extend our listening to how we're perceiving the sounds of our breath around the room. So, go ahead and start.
How do you feel? Yeah. Do you notice any differences from the beginning? There's a lot of really cool, like, I love doing this because it's always different, and there's always different rhythms that happen, different folks within the room, and so there's like rhythms, and then there's like long tones, and there's like a lot of, I don't know, it's kind of like listening outdoors on a windy day. Yeah. Does anyone want to share anything that they noticed or felt, experienced?
I noticed that the pattern that I kind of came up with sounded like when I would be crying really hard when I was a child, like couldn't calm down. So it was interesting to do that on purpose, and then how I felt more relaxed.
Yeah, there's this like release of that sort of embodied sonic tension, which is
and memory.
And memory, yeah. That's super interesting. Yeah, I feel like there's a memory of the sound of this tree that I noticed. The cottonwoods, you know, they kind of sound like water. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, I feel like although we were all very much different when we were giving sound, I felt like there was a connection. It was all connected, joined together somehow.
Yeah, and I feel like sound that's a great point, because I feel like sound is such an interesting connector. Because it's a very different world, and it's a very special one. It's a special art form, and I feel like one that's, between visual art and music. And I feel like working within that space is always like ephemeral and liminal, and it's always an interesting and different experience. So yeah, it's very much kind of like this wind exercise. Anyone else?
I thought it was so interesting, like the lines almost that would kind of like come to you and then pass. And it was like one line would come and then it would pass you, and then you pick up another one.
Yeah, there's like kind of rhythms. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you for participating in that. As both receivers and transmitters of sound. I think we will move into the CLEAT piece. Here is the CLEAT piece. It doesn't really have a title right now. Still thinking about it. But I work in Ableton for this piece. It is a finely cut array of sound. This is a track that I originally worked in and was in stereo, and I asked someone to mix it a little bit so it sounds a little cleaner. And then I mapped out the 16 channels to map onto the CLEAT system. For those of you who maybe don't know, that'll be fine. But so these are the sort of mapped speakers. This goes from speaker 1, 2, 3, and so on to 16. There is a sub, which is 17, and it's like here, or right here.
It's actually both of them.
Both of them. Okay, both of them now. Yeah, that's right. Elastic is on it. And so I went ahead and finally spliced the sounds of the track and kind of mapped them around the room. So for this piece, I mapped the sounds kind of in alignment with, not exactly, but I was thinking a lot about this idea of in deep listening, the focal and the global, and it's this, I wish I had the thing up, but there's a symbol, it's like a circle, which is the global, and then within the circle there's a center, which is the focal. And so within this piece, I was kind of thinking about, there's a, 4-minute sort of intro before kind of things start happening. And so that 4 minutes is just kind of going around in the outer perimeter speakers, and then as the more sound builds, it kind of comes through into the inner sort of speakers. And I was thinking about sound kind of going from the sort of global to the focal, and especially with the sounds of the voice. When there's vocal samples start coming in, those are predominantly located in the perimeter speakers. And so, yeah, the voice is the voice sample is the composer Pauline Oliveros. She'll talk about deep listening in the piece. And I'll go ahead and play it for you. It's about 10 minutes, so relax. And feel free, you could also get up, and if you want to walk around the room, feel free to walk around the room. But yeah, we'll go ahead and listen.
Is it better for us to be sitting in the middle, or does it matter?
It really doesn't matter. I mean, the middle, since it's kind of theater, it's, it's a focal point, but it's not really, you don't really have to, I think, be in the center to experience the sound. Yeah. would ask myself in working with the CLEAT system is how do we feel space, you know, both, you know, how do we fill it, but also how do we feel the space. And so in working with the system, I think checking your sound levels are a big deal. At least it was for this project. It was a little challenge for me because it's not the volumes are just very different versus working on your computer audio. So I would, yeah, definitely, if you're interested in working with the CLEAT system, get in here, listen to your sound on the system, and like adjust your levels once you're here, because it's very, very different. And so in thinking about like how you fill and feel the space, then also asking the question like, how does that translate into the sonic realm? What is the sort of landscape you're working with or creating? Because I think if we're thinking about theater and thinking about how these sounds are actors within, you know, a production, I think we need to think about the sort of sonic perception or consciousness that the sound provides and how it's moving throughout the room. And I also think about, you know, if we flip the system around, then it becomes not, you know, the clouds, but a field. And so within this lies the field of possibility, and put that pun in there. And it's a site to work with, you know, attention, perception, harmony, disharmony, patterns, and, you know, a site to activate. So that's my spiel. Yeah. Anyone have any questions?
Can I pass the mic?
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you think about movement of sound in space. And I know you said that a lot of your practice is storytelling. Like I wonder if you think about like giving movement of sound in space like a narrative arc, or I'm curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do approach sound as narrative, and so like in this piece in particular, it's kind of like a slow build, and so it's like kind of like, you know, this like very slow kind of arch. Can you repeat your question? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. I think that like, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so many speakers here, and like movement of sound is so much more salient with a system like this. And so I'm curious how you think about movement of sound in space, and how you connect like movement perhaps to narrative and
Yeah, great question. I do think about narrative, but I also think about like, I think a lot about, the speaker system in particular, speaker systems as like a field, and so it's like going back to that sort of like landscape of West Texas, like what is in the foreground, what is in the background, thinking about what sounds I want to move where, like gentle textures, maybe they're, you know, those can be like something around the room that create some sort of, I don't know, warmth. And so I think a lot about, when I think about movement, I also think about like embodied listening and how maybe the body reacts to those sounds. That makes sense? Yeah.
I'm just curious, which has been one of your most memorable field locations that you like captured sound?
That's a great question. Yeah, field locations for sound memorable. Oh man. I just went on this very long trip this past month, and I went to this place in western New Mexico called the Bisty Badlands. And the sound there, well, there's two memorable sonic moments, but this one in particular, it was just kind of hallucinatory because there was no one there, like no one, and I was entirely alone, so like surrounded by these rocks, and so like the sound was just so, I'm not used to, just being entirely alone and surrounded by these rocks that are kind of, tall, and I'm walking through these like corridors, and so the way the wind is going over these rocks and kind of dipping into the corridors was really a little eerie, kind of like dusty sonic. And then there's this crow at the very end of the walk. There's this crow that came, and it was just like, well, who is this creature? I don't know. It felt like I was like hallucinating, because it was like I hadn't heard really any sounds besides the wind for a while, and then this crow comes, and it was really, really quite strange. And then a sound, another sound is like a lightning storm, thunderstorms. Those are really crazy and powerful. Those are really fun and kind of difficult to record. But yeah, those are my top two, I think.
I'll just ask another one.
Absolutely.
And was there a moment for you when you realized you might be perceiving or analyzing sound differently than most individuals would?
Yeah, I think my attunement to sound started changing, because I used to play in like punk bands and stuff when I was, young, and but like the weirder stuff started to happen when I worked in editorial, and so I'd record interviews with people, and then the listening back portion, the sort of like post-perception of the sound, I would listen, this is bad, this is why I don't work in editorial, but I would start listening and noticing like the sounds, the recorded sounds, not only the person's voice in the interview, but then the sounds that are existing, like maybe it was a restaurant, or maybe it was outside, or like, started gravitating towards like what those recorded sounds were, and then really kind of, that led me on like a field recording path of just recording the field. Yeah.
What field recorders do you typically use? How many channels are you recording in?
Ooh, that's a good question. What field recorder am I using, and how many channels do I usually record in? I usually use, I think it's a Zoom 5, and sometimes I use this other thing called the Sound Device Mix Pre 3, which has 3 channels. But those are really crispy. The mix, there's one with 6 channels. That one's really nice. The Zoom has 2, or it has 4. It comes with its own sort of stereo, like mic capsule, and then there's XLR inputs that you can plug in, and you can plug in external mics. I have a really nice shotgun mic, which is this microphone that is kind of directional, and whatever you aim it at, it only captures that direction, which is, really great for field recording. And I also have these loam microphones that are really teeny tiny, and those are really great. Yeah, that's an amazing company. They make really cool mics. They also make these electromagnetic pickup mics that will pick up, power in the room and amplify that sound. But those are really great. If you have the windscreens on them, those pick up really sort of fine sounds. Sometimes, you can attach them to like a little T-bar type deal, and like have one here, and then kind of walk around with the microphones. Yeah.
How new is this technology? And is there any like new technology that you might be excited about that like may come in the future?
Whoa, that's a good question. I feel like field recording has been around a long time, and I feel like the technology these days is so accessible. That's the exciting thing about it. Like, you know, you can field record with your phone, your voice app, which is amazing, and you can make good recordings with, there's I think Shure makes a pretty cool phone microphone. It's like a MV88 or something like that, but it's a really nice attachment for your phone. I think that's a really exciting thing, is accessibility of gear and of especially in sound, there's different programs that do different things to manipulate sound. But as far as like future technology, I'm kind of, I don't know. I mean, AI is interesting, but I stay away from it. I'm a little bit of a Luddite. But I do think, in terms of like multi-channel sounds, like I think being able to work with, I think that's a newer technology, and I think Chicago is really lucky to have the CLEAT system, because there's few cities that have, multi-channel sound systems. Like there's people who might set up like 4 speakers, and that's, quad. But I feel like, having a space that you can utilize sound and you can, be in it, and that it's open to, people utilizing it too, is a really, really big bonus, and something I hope for in the future. Yeah.
Hi. Would you be able to talk about a little more about how you actually decide on placement of the sounds in the space? Like, I noticed that the vocals are usually like doubled up symmetrically to kind of draw attention, and like how that hierarchy works with the vocals versus the found sound type field recording stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. I kind of wish I had mapped this out a little better visually. But for this piece in particular, it was, I think, in order to feel more sort of sonic power with the vocals, I did kind of like say there's, maybe it was like these 4 speakers or something, but I did do some layering within Ableton to sort of map out and have that be like the sort of focal point within this piece. And I think it was kind of a matter of like, if I'm remembering correctly, like mostly the middle, and then sometimes I would bounce out to like the perimeter speakers, those sort of ones at the end. But it's kind of like, basically it's kind of like an X is what I was kind of following. Like maybe they'd be here and then they'd go out and then come back in. This idea of sort of following the focal and the global sort of in terms of listening and focus of attention.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about that? Like in terms of like the actual speakers of the X and the focal. Can you just, what does that mean?
Yeah, so in thinking about like the mapping of the CLEAT system, and thinking about, like I think a lot about when I was creating the piece, like where is the attention of this particular sound going, or where is the attention of where the sound is going within the space, within the speaker system, because it is kind of difficult to, I mean, there's many possibilities, and so I felt like for this piece I was kind of following a map of that sort of X, of like the outer perimeter speakers, those like basically the 4. So 1, 2, 3. I think 1 is over here actually. 1 for 16 and 12? 13, yeah. And so kind of like using those and doubling those with the voice, and then kind of bringing the voice kind of back in and out of those, that sort of array. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone want to make a sound? Laughter is good. That's a good sound to end on. All right. Thank you, everyone.